the past few hours. Thanks for joining us here at the Weather Channel. I'm Warren Madden. The last Sunday of summer also looks nice for much of the nation, and we'll tell you all about it in just a minute. But first, let's get right to the forecast center. Sharon Resultant standing by with the latest on Linda.
Thanks a lot, Warren. And again, we are looking a little bit more hopeful about the situation in the eastern Pacific. But again, as Warren said, we have to be very cautious in that situation. Still a lot could happen. Let's go ahead and show you the very latest now with Hurricane Linda as of 8 o'clock Pacific Daylight Time. Centered at 21.3 north, 117.4 west, 500 miles to the west-southwest of Cabo San Lucas, Mexico. And sustained winds of 145 miles per hour. That has gone down since our last advisory. It is moving to the west-northwest at 14. Now, the important thing to note here is the past couple of advisories, we've seen more of a west of northwest movement. So it's moving more westward than it is northward at this point. And estimated central pressure, again, this is an estimate, but it also has been down, or actually gone up just a few notches, 935 millibars. So a couple of indications, A, that we're finding this continue to weaken as it's moving over some slightly cooler water, and B, that it's moving a little bit further away from the coast, which is certainly some good news as well. Another thing I wanted to show you, the coastal flood warnings that are in effect. Again, anytime you have a powerful hurricane like this, and we're still working with the Category 4 hurricane, you get those swells propagating out in all directions from that center of circulation. So the government of Mexico has established these hurricane warnings, and they are for all those regions that you see there in red, including portions of the Baja of California. Now, to get a look at the surf firsthand and what's going on into Southern California, we join now live Bill Keneally at Pacific Beach, and behind you the lights of La Jolla. And if you look off to the left-hand side of the screen there, folks, you'll see some of the waves. Can you tell us a little bit about the surf, Bill?
It is a beautiful night here, Sharon, I might add. You're right. We can hear the surf out there. Not a real terrific surf. I'd say maybe 2 to 3 foot waves breaking right now. They were a little earlier, probably on the order of 4 to 5 feet, but now that we've lost our sea breeze, it's tending to knock down the wave action a bit. As you mentioned, the lights of La Jolla behind me, a lot of the folks out there blazing some bonfires on the beach, and really it is a beautiful night. It should stay a beautiful weekend. The sun was out in abundance today. It was actually a little bit on the muggy side, so I think everybody has this humidity and this hurricane fresh on their mind, but they're taking a very cautious wait-and-see approach as to what impact it'll have, especially on the beach. I think the feeling is that down the road it may bring some flooding rain farther into the desert, but they know well, Sharon, that this water out here being in the low 70s will, in time, knock down this very powerful Hurricane Linda.
Okay, sounds like they have a very good attitude, very good approach to that. Again, there is a lot of uncertainty as far as exactly what the track might be. We can say with some certainty, though, that the surf will increase, and we think that we'll find some surf maybe 4 to 7 feet heading into Sunday afternoon. So folks, of course, will have to be a little bit more wary of the riptides. Bill Keneally, thank you very much. We'll check back in with you in another hour. Let's go ahead and look at the satellite picture, and we'll get another inspection here of how this does not look quite as impressive as it did this time last night, for instance. We were working with the Category 5, but there could be a little bit of dry air intruding in on the eastern side of this as well, a little more elliptical in shape rather than looking more round or circular. And so we're seeing some signs as this is slowly working into some cooler water that this is slowly weakening. Now, what I wanted to show you is a look at the water vapor loop, and you can clearly see our trough here that is digging on southward. There are different scenarios on what could happen here too. One scenario is that if this trough digs far enough south, it could pull this northward and up toward the coast. But again, the thinking might be that this may miss the trough entirely and continue well out to the west. And the thing that we want to point out is that the worst case scenario at this time is appearing to seem less likely. So our trough may provide the opportunity for some moisture to move into Southern California, but there are no guarantees, and we just say the most responsible thing you can do is to keep it tuned here to the Weather Channel, and we will keep you involved.
The Weather Channel. No place on Earth has better weather. Well, how about that Hurricane Linda? Yesterday, a very powerful Category 5 hurricane, starting to weaken somewhat here as the days roll on, which is some fantastic news. Now, in this tropical update, we're going to concentrate on what's happening with Hurricane Linda because there are some interests in the southwest and also the western Pacific, but then we'll also talk about the Atlantic, Caribbean, and the Gulf of Mexico. Now, if I get too long-winded and don't get to the Atlantic, not much is happening. It's pretty quiet right now. Okay, let's get started here on Hurricane Linda so we don't run out of time. Hurricane Linda, this is the 8 o'clock advisory. It is moving west-northwest at 14. Now, the emphasis here on the west-northwest. It's actually it's moving a little bit north of west, which is even better news for the folks in Cabo San Lucas and for Mexico because it's heading farther that way. Pressure has come up 935 millibars since yesterday. Yesterday, I believe, it was around 900 millibars. So we're seeing quite a change here in Hurricane Linda. Now, there are coastal flood warnings out because the winds may not be affecting Baja California or even Mexico, but the waves and the swells could cause some coastal flooding. So that's why the government has issued those coastal flood warnings. Now look and see what's happening here. We have seen a big change in our hurricane. It's not that symmetrical, perfect, classic hurricane like we saw yesterday. It's undergoing some changes here, and it's very hard to even find an eye. We're not seeing the oranges and the reds hardly at all anymore, let alone around the center. We're seeing breaks in it. So could it be weakening? Well, the forecast is for it to continue to weaken somewhat as it tracks off towards the west-northwest. So what's going to happen with it? It's going to continue on that track, obviously, but we will see this trough deepen here. Now, a lot of the computer models that the Hurricane Center's been looking at, a lot of them are saying that this trough is going to move into the west and not pick up the hurricane, which is fantastic news for Southern California. But there's still that chance. Another model does indicate that it can get picked up and brought into Southern California. So it's very uncertain at this point. So the best advice we give is to just keep us tuned in here. We will let you know what the forecast is with Hurricane Linda. And it will, though, continue to weaken, which is even better news. If it does get picked up by this trough, we won't be talking about a Category 4 hurricane at this point. It'll probably be just some heavy rain, maybe some high surf, which we'll probably start to see here in Southern California, even with the hurricane being this far away, and some increase in swells here. And that's really about it. So just keep us tuned in. We'll let you know any changes here with Hurricane Linda. Just off to the west, we have our tropical storm Marty, just upgraded. Winds are at 40, moving west at 6, and does have a chance to intensify somewhat, but not a big threat at this point to anybody. But we are definitely watching it for the folks here in Hawaii. Now, this is the perspective where the hurricane, the tropical storm is, and here is Hawaii, again, about 1,300 miles off to the southeast. And the western Pacific, this is now Typhoon David. Winds are about 75 miles per hour, a minimal typhoon at this time, moving northwest. And it should continue on that track and maybe go more towards the west-northwest here in the next couple of days, and should continue to intensify also. And this is Typhoon Oliva, continuing to weaken. It's starting maybe to start to interact with some land in Japan, and it could make landfall, but as a very weak typhoon, if not a tropical storm. So that's some good news there for the folks in Kyushu. Tropical storm Erika, moving east at 12. Not a big problem right now to anybody except for the folks in the Azores. You could start to feel the tropical storm force winds in the next 12 to 24 hours. Looking still very impressive here on the satellite. We are seeing still convection around it. Gulf of Mexico quiet tonight. A few thunderstorms here in the Caribbean. No low-level circulation associated with that area, though. Another wave, upper-level winds, not conducive to any development. Good news there. And we do have a wave getting ready to come off of Africa, but it's been very quiet here in the eastern Atlantic. Well, coming up next, let's find out what's happening in the West Coast.
The Weather Channel. No place on Earth has better weather. It's time now for a look at our tropical update. We're going to talk about a weakening Hurricane Linda, also about a brand new tropical storm east-southeast of Hawaii, and talk about another typhoon that's going to be hitting southern parts of Japan. Let's first of all start off with the big news now over the eastern Pacific Ocean. It's Hurricane Linda. The 2 o'clock advisory Pacific Daylight Time. The center of circulation 21.5 north, 118.3 west, or about 550 miles west-southwest of the tip of Baja California, which is Cabo San Lucas, Mexico. Top sustained winds now down to 120 miles per hour. The weakening trend started yesterday as it moved over progressively cooler waters. That trend is going to continue. It's moving west-northwest, almost due west now at about 13 miles per hour. The pressure's really come up. Signs of another weakening trend, 955 millibars. Let's show you what's happening as we look at the enhanced satellite picture right now. And you can see that once again, 24 hours ago at this time, we saw a very powerful hurricane, lots of deep reds and oranges, a lot of deep convection around the center of circulation. And you can see right now, we've lost a lot of those oranges and reds, that very deep convection. So again, we do have a weakening hurricane at this time, and it appears right now that this will not have a major impact on Southern California, although you could be looking at some higher swells for sure along the Baja California coastline into around San Diego. But overall, this thing is moving its way on towards the west, and as it appears right now, Hurricane Linda will not have a major impact on Southern California. One of the reasons why we thought we could be having some trouble in Southern California was this big trough low pressure developing over the northwestern part of the country and digging or beginning to advance southeastward. We thought that would have a chance of picking up Linda. That did not occur. Linda's a very powerful hurricane. It was, and basically had a mind of its own moving on towards the west. And right now it looks like it's going to be moving more towards the west-northwest and not take that major curve to the north or even to the northeast that would have impacted greatly southern parts of California. Still looking at some high-level moisture from this hurricane, and that will still indirectly have an impact on much of the southwestern corner of the country, maybe enhancing the monsoonal conditions over Arizona and New Mexico a little bit better during the next couple of days. Coastal flood warnings currently in effect right now for about the southern half of Baja California and over the western parts of from that point southward over the west central parts of Mexico as well. Coastal flood warnings are in effect there. But what about Tropical Storm Marnie right now? We can talk about that again to the east-southeast of Hilo, Hawaii. This is the string of pearls right here. We're looking at a brand new Tropical Storm Marty, 14 degrees north, 136.3 west, or about 1,300 miles east-southeast of Hilo. Again, top winds here. Minimal tropical storm at this point, 45 miles per hour. It is westbound at 6 miles per hour. Further strengthening is probably going to be likely now for the next 24 hours as it continues moving basically due west, not affecting anybody anytime soon. The pressure right now is at 1,002 millibars. Now again, we can see Linda right here. We can also see the Hawaiian chain right in through there. And of course, we can see what was happening with Marty beginning to move its way on towards the west. What about the Pacific Ocean, the Westpac right now? Well, we can talk about Oliva. Again, it used to be a very powerful typhoon. This one right now is beginning to work its way on towards the north. It definitely is going to be impacting the southern parts of Japan during the next 24 hours. Already is. It's going to be just a minimal typhoon at this point as it affects the southernmost islands of Japan, but it will contain a lot of rainfall. In the middle of the Westpac right now and well to the east of the Mariana Islands, we do have another typhoon. This is David, expected to intensify and become a rather powerful typhoon within the next few days. Tropical Storm Erika still has all of its tropical characteristics right now. The 5 o'clock advisory, and you can see it's moving eastward right now at 12 miles per hour. Will be affecting the Azores for sure. We can put this one into motion for you and show you that overall we're looking at still healthy tropical storm at this point. Expected to become extra tropical during the hour. Looks like it will be.
We have a lot to get through in the next 4 minutes, so pay attention. Here's Hurricane Linda, and these are the latest coordinates from the National Hurricane Center, now at 21.9 north, 119.5 west, and that is 760 miles to the south of San Diego. Winds now down to 105 miles an hour, now a Category 2 hurricane after once having been a Category 5 hurricane. Winds to the west-northwest at 13, now the movement is to the west-northwest at 13 miles an hour, and that is definitely some good news as far as the direction is concerned. We still, though, have coastal flood warnings in effect along the coast of Baja California, as well as on the west coast of Mexico. Large swells will be blowing into the coastline, and so they do have a coastal flood warning in effect. We continue to see Hurricane Linda move to the west-northwest away from the United States, which is definitely some good news, although we are seeing some of the clouds just now beginning to head over the southern tip of California. And a little bit of moisture may also be fed up into the southwest corner of the United States, triggering a few showers and possibly some thunderstorms, possibly some heavier rain, enhancing the monsoonal flow to the southwest later on today. We also are going to see the surf be kicked up a bit along the south-facing beaches of Southern California. They're expecting some large swells there over the next 24 hours. Our trough continues to sit off the coast of California, and originally the track was possibly to bring Hurricane Linda into the southern tip of California. That is not going to be the case. The latest forecast track continues to move Linda on a west-northwesterly pace and weaken to a tropical storm over the next 24 to 36 hours. We also have Tropical Storm Marty, and you can see the latest coordinates on this, now about 1,200 miles to the east-southeast of Hilo, with maximum sustained winds at 45 miles an hour, and the movement continues to the west at 6 miles an hour. Marty is over fairly warm waters as it continues to move to the west. Will strengthen slightly over the next 24 to 36 hours, but again, staying on this westerly path, so should not, at least this point, affect the Hawaiian Islands over the next 72 hours, but we will continue to watch this in case that does change. We also are watching a couple of typhoons in the Pacific. This is Typhoon David, and this is moving to the west-northwest and is not affecting any land masses. This one, though, is Typhoon Oliva, and it is going to be bringing some squally weather and gusty winds to the southern tip of Japan for this afternoon as well as for tonight, moving inland as a minimal typhoon. Now to the Atlantic, where we still have an eye on Erika, with maximum sustained winds now up a bit, some strengthening in the past 24 hours, now up to 65 miles an hour, moving to the east at 10 miles an hour, and should be moving over the Azores within the next 18 to 30 hours with tropical storm force winds. You can see how this continues to push to the east, and that general motion is expected to continue. It's moving to the east at 10 miles an hour. Let's check out the Caribbean and all.
In fact, let me just take a shot at it and see if we have that in, yeah, the other source. Let's switch to the other source quickly right now, and we'll see that right now it's the center is 765 miles south-southwest of San Diego, winds 90 miles an hour, and a central pressure of 963 millibars. So there's the latest, moving west-northwest at 13 miles an hour. We have some flood watches in effect also, and actually they're coastal flood warnings in the Pacific area, and to be sure, an awful lot of water sloshing up on some of the beaches out there. In fact, the coastal flood watches are located from Punta Eugenia to Cabo San Lucas on the Baja, the Pacific side of the Baja, and then on the mainland of Mexico from Ensenada del Pabellon to Punta del Estrecho, and that includes the area right around Manzanillo, Mexico. We take a look at our visible satellite imagery. The eye is still there. The aircraft have gone in, and notice that on the east side of the eye wall there's a little bit of a break, so it's losing a lot of its energy. One thing we see is some stratocumulus clouds. These are low clouds that sit over the Pacific off the Baja and off U.S. California all summer long, and it indicates cool water. So we've already moved into an area now with Linda where the water is below 80 degrees Fahrenheit, and back here it'll be down around 75-ish, so it's relentlessly weakening right now, and that's good news for the Southern California coastal area. More on the future of Linda and the effects that it might have in the U.S. coming up at the top of the hour with Jim and Declan. Tropical storm Marty, though, further out to sea, is really not intensifying too much. This is the latest, 45-mile-per-hour winds, moving west-southwest, drifting west-southwest at only 3, so it's almost wandering now with 1,002 millibar pressure. Not a whole lot of upper support. Over 1,000 miles, over 1,300 miles southeast of Hilo, Hawaii. And this is another area where we don't usually see much of a threat of hurricanes as in the Hawaiian Islands. It's kind of a rarity. But if anything, the computer forecasts are taking this off toward generally a westerly direction and staying pretty weak. So we're going to have to see if it sort of goes in the weaker or more intense direction. Marty, no immediate threat. And of course, here is Linda as it creeps on off toward the west. Now back on into the Pacific Ocean.
Is Erika. What is left of Erika? Well, it is still a tropical storm, downgraded now with maximum sustained winds of 65 miles per hour. Of course, at one time it was Hurricane Erika, and it is at the 5 p.m. advisory was estimated to be about 38.1 north, longitude 36.1 west, or about 390 miles west of the Azores. Maximum sustained winds around 65 miles per hour, moving toward the east-northeast at about 12 miles per hour. And indications are that little change in strength is likely over the next 24 hours. And here you can see through the satellite view, Erika continuing to move eastward across the north.
If it weren't for
U.S. and into Canada, we've got some rather unsettled conditions underneath these bright white clouds here. Also some storminess moving through the Dakotas and into Minnesota, and some scattered activity to the south. And of course, here is Hurricane Linda that we'll have more details on coming up. For our tropical update, we want to take a look at what's been going on in the Pacific and in the Atlantic, and we'll start you out in the Pacific, in the eastern Pacific, where we've been watching Hurricane Linda very closely. The latest coordinates have Linda centered at 22.4 north, 121.8 west. That puts the center about 760 miles south-southwest of San Diego, California. Winds 85 miles per hour. Still moving off to the west-northwest at 13 miles per hour, and the pressure at 962 millibars. And you can see it highlighted here on your screen. A look at the satellite view shows that it, again, continues to move off to the west-northwest. We still note a good bit of convection with it. That's still due, we think, to the anticyclonic flow aloft. It is expected to move into some cooler waters, and it is expected to continue to decrease. However, there are still some effects being felt and anticipated to be felt as we head on into the California coast. The combination of the astronomical high tide and the large swells could cause some coastal problems in parts of Southern California, with maybe some beach erosion or some tidal flooding. That's certainly a possibility with our Hurricane Linda. Also, watching an area to the south, the tropical storm Marty. And as we take a look at the latest coordinates, 12.1 north, 136.3 west. That puts the center about 1,350 miles southeast of Hilo, Hawaii. The wind's 40 miles per hour. It's moving to the southwest at 3 miles per hour, and it's not terribly impressive at this point, although we'll continue to watch it, and we will continue to watch Hurricane Linda as well. Into the western Pacific we go, where watching Oliva, which is expected to bring some rainy conditions, perhaps some substantial rain, as well as windy conditions over 60 miles per hour to Kyushu. Also watching David here, Typhoon David, which is expected to continue to strengthen. Into the Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean we go. We notice actually here southern Florida into the Bahamas, an area of convection associated with a cold front here. Not expecting anything to get going here, although we'll continue to watch the area and let you know if anything does seem to get better organized. Not in a terribly favorable area for tropical development. So we head into the Caribbean, a wave moving through the northeastern Caribbean, providing some convection here and some wet weather and some cloudiness. But again, we're not expecting any development, at least not at this point. We'll watch all of these areas and let you know if anything does occur. Tropical storm Erika now churning through the northern Atlantic, expected to affect the Azores into Monday with perhaps tropical storm force conditions. A rather large wind field with tropical storm Erika. It is expected to become extratropical in the next day or so. As for right now, though, still a tropical storm centered at 38.3 north, 34.3 west, about 330 miles west of the Azores Islands, and maximum sustained winds 65 miles per hour, moving off to the east-northeast, and the pressure now 994 millibars. That's it for the tropics. Stay tuned. Coming up next, we'll have your Pacific update and look at your forecast. Don't